Well, I don't know about you, but when I need a little bit of encouragement, I like to read some books, listen to podcasts, sit down and read my journal, and just kind of refresh myself on why I continue to do what we do. Welcome back. If this is your first time here, my name is Brianna, and my husband Gray and I like to live a slow life at home, learning, practicing, and teaching our children traditional skills. Well, it is a rainy day here, and I wanted to take this opportunity to share some of my favorite homesteading quotes that inspire me when I need a little bit of motivation to keep going. This time of year can get really tiring between all of the planning and everything that needs to go into the garden. It is a lot of work. And if I were being completely honest, oftentimes I can get discouraged with everything that we're balancing in our modern life with housework, parenting, just relationships, you name it. It can get exhausting. And one source of inspiration and strength that I find is by reading. And I like to keep a commonplace book. And this is the place that I write down quotes, things that I'm learning, where I take notes when I'm reading a new book or listening to an audiobook or a podcast. And a lot of times I will see an inspiring quote that really resonates with me and I'll write it down. I have started using the Notes app because I found that I don't always have this book with me, but I'll use my Notes app in my phone and I'll jot that down before I forget. And then I can transfer it into this book, which I keep as a keepsake and a reference point for me to look back and kind of see where I was and what was inspiring at the time. Well, between this book and my phone, which I screenshotted some of the quotes from our website that I have up, I'm going to share with you 10 homesteading quotes that I think are really inspiring and meaningful that might be encouraging to you. So you're going to have to bear with me on the names of the people that have quoted these quotes because some of them I really don't know how to pronunciate. But the first quote that I want to share with you is by Hannah Rothschild. And it says, "The mundanity of those chores, the repetition, acts as a kind of meditation. I start each day with a series of numbers and questions written on a piece of paper, put them in my pocket, and get on with the business of farming. By mid-morning, the answers are clear." And I really liked this one when I read it because that is so true for me. Sometimes all it takes is getting busy with my body and listening to no inputs. I am one that I do love to have a little something in my ear, whether it be an audiobook or a podcast, but there is a lot of value, I think, in doing these tasks with no inputs, because this is when we can let our mind rest and come up with some new ideas that will carry us forward and solutions to our problems. Working in the garden and doing regular chores, feeding the animals, housework, can really be a sort of meditation, and I have found that to be true in my life. The next quote that I want to share with you is by Robert Stevenson, and it reads, "Don't judge each day by the harvest you reap, but by the seeds that you plant." I really like this because by the end of the day as a homemaker, I can sometimes feel like, what did I do today? But when I look back and when I look at, okay, there were a lot of seeds planted. I might not see the harvest right now, but I did plant the seeds, and I can feel good about that at the end of the day, especially on those days when you look around and you think, what did I even do today? Nothing has changed. The next quote that I want to share with you is a Greek proverb, and this is really popular. I've heard this a lot. I think that there was recently an Instagram reel that went viral with this audio sound, but for good reason. "A society grows great when old men plant trees whose shade they know they will never sit in." This is incredibly important in the society we live in today because we are kind of a instantaneous culture where we order something and the next day it's on our doorstep, which I love. I will say I am a person that takes full well advantage of the conveniences of modern day. I think it's also important to put our efforts into things that maybe we won't see the benefits of, but that are good for our future generations and society down the line. The next quote I especially loved because I have a whole section on the website that talks about, well, before I continue on, keep in mind, I have a list of 100 homesteading quotes that are indexed by category on my website, and I will link those down below. And if you liked these, you will definitely like the rest of them that I have cataloged and saved for a reference point for you. The next quote is in the section of homesteading quotes that directly relates to children. And as a homeschooling mother, I am always thinking about education, and I've really transformed my view on what education means and have come to the conclusion that education is always happening. And I really like this quote, and it kind of overlaps my two passions, which are homeschooling and homesteading. And it reads, "The best education does not happen at a desk, but rather engaged in everyday living, hands-on exploring, in active relationship with life." And that is so true. Our children are learning by watching. More is caught than taught. They are watching our every move. They are learning when they are out in the sandbox and dumping sand from one pile to the next. They are learning when they watch us do our budget and order groceries and go and explore a nearby creek together. Or I think it's something we should be keeping in mind as parents, but also for ourselves. This doesn't necessarily relate to children. Some of our best education is just getting started and not being afraid to learn to grow a new variety of flower or fruit, or learn a new skill. And you know that about us, we're all about learning new skills, and we get the best education when we do a little research, but just jump in and get some experience. The next quote refers to cooking from scratch, which I do a lot of, and it's by the one and only Julia Child. And she says that you learn to cook so that you don't have to be a slave to recipes. You get what's in season and you know what to do with it. And I just loved this because it is exactly what cooking on the homestead is. Because when you are cooking from your long-term food storage pantry and your garden, it doesn't always look like going to Pinterest, finding the recipes, and then going to the store and getting all the ingredients. You start with, what do I have? What can I make with this? And I think knowing the basics around cooking can really be helpful because you're not a slave to recipes. You look at what you have and you make something that's delicious for your family that everybody can enjoy. The next quote is by Henry Beecher, and it reads, "A world without a Sabbath would be like a man without a smile, like summer without flowers, and like a homestead without a garden. It is the most joyous day of the week." Now, this is something that I wrote down because it was actually really challenging to me and inspiring. Taking a weekly rest is something that I really look forward to doing in the future. And I liked this quote because it had homesteading references when it was emphasizing the importance of a Sabbath rest. The next quote I'm going to share with you is straight out of the book of Proverbs, but it is so good and so true. And just like Proverbs always is, it's just a real facts. This is a matter of fact, and that encourages me too, because a lot of times well, let me read the quote and then you'll know what I'm talking about. It says, "He that gathereth in summer is a wise son, but he that sleepeth in harvest is a son that causeth shame." Proverbs 10:5. Now, this is sometimes exactly what I need, because there are times, either not necessarily during planting but harvest season, that I grow weary. I am in the kitchen nonstop and I get tired keeping up. And this is just a real life, matter of fact scripture that just encourages me to do the hard thing, because ultimately the hard things are what cause us to grow and to reap good fruit in our lives. The next quote I liked because it does relate to teaching future generations about where our food comes from, but also it's an encouragement to just this modern world. And it says, "There are two spiritual dangers in not owning a farm. One is the danger of supposing that breakfast comes from the grocery store, and the other that heat comes from the furnace." And I like this because I like anything that kind of makes you step back a few feet and really be grateful for where you're at. because throughout most of history, people did not forget where their food was coming from, did not forget that where their heat was coming from, because they had to spend most of their energy obtaining those things. And so we live in a very easy society right now, and I find that meditating on the fact that it wasn't like that for most of human history really brings me back down to earth and makes me really grateful for where I am, and also encourages me to teach my children these things, because it is really important to know that it wasn't like this for most of human history, and I'll leave it at that. I like this one. It reminds me a lot of Gray. Gray talks to me about how agriculture is, in his opinion, one of the most just pursuits of wealth creation. And so this quote really reminds me of him, and it is by none other than the great Thomas Jefferson. And it says, "Agriculture is our wisest pursuit because it will in the end contribute most to real wealth, good morals, and happiness." And I liked that. It's something to think about as far as the economy and what agriculture produces for our economy. The next quote is by George Washington, and it is so simple and so sweet that I just thought I would share it. And it says, "I would rather be on my farm than emperor of the world." I hope that this was encouraging to you. Again, I have a list of 100 quotes if you need a little bit more inspiration over on the blog. If there are any quotes that I have not included there, I would love to hear them. So leave those in the comments below if there is a homesteading or farming or cooking from scratch homeschooling quote that you find a lot of inspiration from.